Welcome to the Cal Sailing Club. I'm John Bongiovanni. I'm in charge of sailing instruction here. This video will help you learn how to rig, inspect, and reef a dinghy. We'll be focusing on the RS Quest, one of our newer boats, but you should also know how to rig a Bahia, and we'll talk a little bit about the differences between the two. They're rigged very similarly, except that the way you tension the forestay is different on the two boats. On the Bahia, there's a line that comes out of the back of the mast. On the Quest, there's a lever, much like that of a JY-15, under the jib, so you have to unfurl the jib in order to tension it or detension it. And although it has a roller furling jib, the Quest also has a jib halyard, which has to be tensioned before you go on the water and detensioned as you put it away. The sails are hoisted somewhat differently and reefed somewhat differently too. The other main difference is in the rudder system. On the Bahia, there's an uphaul and a downhaul to bring the rudder blade up and down. On the Quest, it's rigged more like a catamaran with a lever and 3 positions that you can lock the rudder in place. Before taking a boat out, you should check the dinghy log to make sure there aren't problems that have been reported but not yet fixed. The dinghy log is on the website. You can check it from here in the clubhouse, or you can check it at home. You don't even have to log into the site to see it. As you can see, there's a list of all of the boats in a dashboard format: green, yellow, red. Green, no issues are reported. Yellow, some issues have been reported that aren't serious, that have not yet been fixed. And red means do not sail. After you've checked the dinghy log, you want to sign the boat out, put in your membership number, the details of the boat, the time that you went out in this log on the day leader's desk. Before we take the boat out of the yard, we want to make sure the boat is in a seaworthy condition and that all safety equipment is on board. It's important to inspect this before you bring the boat onto the water. You don't want to spend all that time to bring the boat to the dock and then discover that there's some issue that will require you to bring it back to the yard. Worse yet, you don't want equipment failure on the water that you could have caught on land. The club requires you to have a paddle in the boat when you're on the water. The best place to store the paddle is under, but not in, the Gennaker bag. It'll be out of the way. If you store it in the Gennaker bag, you risk tearing the sail, which is fairly delicate. Another piece of required equipment in the club is an anchor, shown here. It's worth taking a few minutes every time you go out to inspect the anchor. If you need it on the water, you're going to need it in a hurry, and that's not the time to find out that it wasn't rigged properly or you don't know how to deploy it. The anchor's a Danford type with a chain on the end and a line spliced to the chain of about 50 feet. The line should smoothly go from the chain over this metal fitting at the front of the boat, back under, and be securely tied to the thwart here with at least 2 wraps and at least a bowline, preferably a double bowline with maybe a couple of extra half hitches. Now that we've verified that the anchor is rigged properly, we want to secure it so it doesn't deploy on its own. On the Quest, we have a couple of bungees here around the thwart that the anchor crowns fit into. After the anchor is secured, coil the line and the chain and stuff them under one of these bungees. Now the anchor is ready to go when you need it, and you know it's not going to deploy on its own. Next, we want to remove the sail covers, which we keep on the sails when the boat's stored in the yard to protect the sails from ultraviolet light. We'll remove the main sail cover first. This is the most common type of sail cover, which is secured by a set of clasps like this. Simply a matter of undoing the clasps and taking the sail cover off. Some sail covers are secured by strings tying them together, and it's pretty easy to figure out how to undo it. You may have to step on the boat to reach a clasp that's high on the mast. If you do so, it's perfectly okay. Make sure you never step on the boat when it's on the trailer aft of the wheels. Next, we'll remove the jib sail cover. All the jib sail covers are like this one, with a zipper, and it's hoisted up and zipped when the boat's put into the yard with one of the two halyards, either the Gennaker halyard in this case, or some people will use a main halyard. It doesn't really matter. You just have to figure out which one is used. If I give a little tug on it, you can see it pulls on this part of the line, which is the Gennaker halyard. Now you have to figure out what's holding the Gennaker halyard in place. In this case, it's going through the normal Gennaker halyard cleat, which is located here. Occasionally, you might find that somebody has tied this around the thwart here, or even around the main halyard cleat. However they did it, you got to figure it out and undo it, and then pull the sail cover down while you're unzipping it. When you get the sail cover down, you have to remove the halyard. The way that a halyard is typically attached to the sail cover is by pushing a loop through, and then the ball through the loop and pulling it tight. So the way to undo it is to get the loop through on the same side as the ball, make it bigger, pull it out. As with all halyards, if it's not connected to anything, you need it firmly in your hand so it doesn't fly. And finally, you want to secure the Gennaker halyard someplace. This ring here is a convenient place. What you want to be careful to do is not to do the standard pull a loop through and pull the ball through and pull it tight. Because of the size of this and some of the balls, this arrangement could easily become undone. A more secure arrangement is to take a bite of the line and make a few half hitches, overhand knot, and take the slack out at the halyard cleat.
The RS Quest, like our other dinghies, is stored in the yard with the forestay and the shrouds tensioned loose because they're made of metal and they expand and contract with temperature. If we stored them tight and it got really cold overnight, they could pull the fittings out of the hull. The way you tension and detension the forestay on the RS Quest is first by tensioning the halyard for the jib, which is over here. If you don't tension the halyard first, you may have problems furling and unfurling the jib. The jib furling line is here, goes to a cleat under here you can't see. You just pull the line down from it, grab one of the jib sheets, and open it up. The tensioner arm is like that on a JY15, and you access it by opening this Velcro pocket. There it is. Pull it down to tension it. When you're putting it away, lift it up. So again, tension the halyard first when you're taking it out, then tension the forestay. Opposite order when you're putting the boat away. Detension the forestay, and then detension the halyard.
Next, you walk around the boat. You want to make sure that there's a bow line and that it's secured to the boat. As you walk around, look up at the masthead float. There should be one, and it shouldn't be cocked at an angle. If it is, it's not secured completely to the mast, and the boat should not be sailed. From the side of the boat, check to make sure a figure 8 or other stopper knot is tied at the end of the jib sheet, that the hiking straps are secured and not too loose, and look for any crack in the hull. Give a pull on the hiking straps to make sure that they are connected securely. Check the rudder, the tiller, and the tiller extension. Give a good pull on the tiller extension, because this is the part of the boat that breaks most frequently. Now you walk around the port side of the boat and inspect the same items. The last and very important item to be checked is the rigging on the mainsail. The mainsail has 4 different adjustments called Corva, which stand for Cunningham, Outhaul, Reefing, and Vang or Ganav. Make sure that all of them are uncleated and loose. There should be 2 lines at the end of the boom, the outhaul and the reefing line. Very important thing to do before you put the boat in the water is to drain the bilge. There's a drain plug here, one of them on the Quest. Put the boat over the carpet so you don't damage the hull, and either lift it by the bow or push down on the stern like this. and look for water coming out here. As you see in this boat, there's nothing. The boat should have been drained before it was put away, but you can never count on that. In addition, if there's a crack in the cockpit and it rained overnight, it could take water in that way. We're good. We'll put the drain plug in. It only needs to be finger tight, and we're ready to put the boat in the water. We'll drain it again when we take the boat out of the water, and if there's any appreciable amount of water in here, it should be reported, because that means there's a crack in the cockpit or the hull someplace. Water will come out here in the self-draining scuppers, which is not a problem. Okay, we're ready to put the boat in the water. You can do it by yourself, but it goes a lot easier with two people, and Pearl is here to help. If you have two people, one person's on the bow line, and the other person is on the crane. If one person is very inexperienced, put them on the crane because it's a much easier job, and you take the bow line. So you're going to explain to your assistant what's going on and what their role is. She's going to operate the crane with that orange box. The crane has an electrical up and down, but you move it back and forth with the line connected to it. So the idea is we're going to turn the boat through 180 degrees, lower it into the water without hitting any of the rigging. Somebody has to be in control of the boat all the time. The person on the crane will be holding on to the stern of the boat until the person with the bow line goes down the ramp. When they're in position, we'll do a tug-of-war with the bow line and the line on the crane to stabilize the boat and stop it spinning. Then we can move it safely along the dock without spinning it. I'll set up the bow line ahead of time on the side of the boat where I can get it easily and where it won't get caught on the trailer. We'll move the boat into position as close to the crane as it can get without actually touching it. That way you get a vertical lift instead of slamming back when the crane lifts it. Let's move the boat a little bit closer without hitting the crane. This is as close as we can get it. So the sling has 3 connectors, 2 short lines and a long one. The short lines connect to a loop at the base of the shroud, and the long one goes to a line at the rudder post. We want to make sure it's not caught on anything. Everything looks good. We'll get Pearl into position at the stern of the boat to raise it. For safety, you want to make sure never let anyone get under the boat when it's raised by the crane. And notice under club rules, we're all wearing life jackets when we're operating the crane or on the dock. Here it goes. We're watching it carefully as it goes up to make sure it doesn't snag. We're going to raise it all the way up to where it stops. Now I'm going to move the trailer out of the way. Notice that Pearl has her hand on the stern of the boat to control it spinning. Now I'll come back and get the bow line. If necessary, I'll help her push it out over the water, making sure all the time that the shrouds are not hitting the crane. When we get it far enough out, I'm going to take the bow line and go down the ramp. If this were a high tide day, I could possibly hop on the dock, but I can't do it today, so I'll just walk down the ramp. I want to go all the way down the ramp as far as I can and line up with where the boat is pointing. At this point, Pearl can let go of the stern of the boat, grab the crane line, and we do a tug-of-war to stop the boat from spinning. There we are. The boat's not spinning. I can pull it toward me to get it more out over the water and walk up the ramp so that the boat is parallel to the seawall. I stand roughly over the cleat that I'm going to connect it to on the dock. Now we lower the boat into the water. I'm watching the mast and the spreaders all the time to make sure they don't hit the crane. If we had a third person helping, I would send them down in the dock to grab the line from me. But if we don't, I tie the line off to the ramp, either low enough so I can go around and reach up and untie it, or I use this hitch here, the highwayman's hitch, which I can easily undo from the dock by yanking on the working end of the line. Always test it, because if you don't tie it correctly, tension on the bow line can undo it. So here I'll give a yank on the working end, and out it comes. I pull the boat into about a foot from the dock and cleat it off using a cleat hitch. Remember, the boat is very tippy, and it's especially tippy if the centerboard is up like it is now. So I'm going to step on like this and quickly get to this position with one leg on each side. Wait until the boat calms down, and then I can either crawl through under the lower shroud like this, or on the Quest, if I keep my chest to the center of the boat, I can step easily through between the upper and lower shroud. Always keeping my weight relatively low and centered. I'll unhook the sling. And when we raise the hoist back up, I want to make sure that none of these loops of rope catch on to anything like the tiller or the boom or anything else. We're going to demonstrate rigging this boat on land. And this is something you can do to practice rigging. Come down to the club, ask the day leader for a boat, pull it out of the yard, do the inspection just like we did, and make sure, since you're raising the mainsail, to point the boat into the wind, as we've done now. The second thing you want to do is take a cooler out of the kitchen, put a life jacket on it, and shove it securely under the back of the boat. This will allow you to walk safely on the back of the boat without tipping it forward. We're going to raise the mainsail. On the RS Quest, the sail is connected to the mast with a bolt rope sewn into the luff of the sail that feeds up into a track in the mast. When we de-rig the boat, we pull the sail out completely, roll it up like this, and secure it to the boom with the main sheet. So the first thing you have to do is take the main sheet off, figure out how whoever put it away did it, because there's no standard way of wrapping it around. Unwrap it. And unroll the sail. Now, as the sail raises, what you don't want to have happen is for it to power up and potentially blow you over in heavy winds. So we want to make sure that if the wind catches the sail as it's going up, all it'll do is push the boom all the way out. So we want to make sure the main sheet is pulled entirely through the block. And that isn't enough, because the main sheet goes back and forth through a set of pulleys to give you mechanical advantage when you're working the sheet. And you want to make sure that each of those individual sections of the line, called the falls, are about the same length. Otherwise, they could hang up and catch the boom and it won't go out. So that's what I'm doing now. And then the last thing to think about is which side of the boat you want the boom on. Take a look at the vang fitting and see which side of the mast it's riveted to. Put the boom on the same side of the boat, which in this case is the port side. If you put it on the starboard side, the vang fitting would go across the track and potentially the sail would catch in it as you're raising or lowering. So we'll move the boom to port. And finally, we connect the halyard to the head of the sail and start raising the sail. Okay, so we find the head of the sail. Notice that there's a metal lug that feeds into the mast track, and below it, sewn into the luff of the sail, is a bolt rope that you also feed into the mast track. So we're going to find the halyard and connect it. The halyard comes out of the mast here, and if you just yank on it and see where tension is, you can figure out where it was tied. There is no standard place to tie it. Okay, so now I remember the two rules of using the halyard. One is if it's not tied to something, I have it firmly in my hand so it doesn't fly. Rule number two is before I use it, I look up and make sure it isn't tangled on anything. And then the last thing I want to think about as I attach the halyard to the sail is this plastic ball on the end of it, which prevents it from going into the mast if it does fly. Which side of the sail I want that on. And again, I think of the vang fitting. I don't want it to hit and jam on the vang fitting, so I want it on the other side, which in this case will be the starboard side. I'll push a loop of the halyard into starboard, through this grommet, put the ball through the loop, and pull it tight. And now I'm ready to go. As I'm doing this, you can see one person can do this. It's a little bit easier with two, with one person pulling on the halyard and the second person feeding the sail up through the track. So take some of the slack out, feed the lug in, pull up, and start feeding the bolt rope. You can see on this sail the bolt rope doesn't go all the way to the top, so it's a little tricky to get it in. Okay, and then again, you want to feed it in relatively straight so it doesn't jam. At this point, you could have some problems. You should be able to pull the sail all the way to the top of the mast. If the sail doesn't go up, the first culprit possibly is this thing here, the vang fitting. If it's tightened, it should have been loosened before you started this, but if you left it tight, it's going to hold the boom down. You won't be able to get the sail to the top of the mast. And then finally, on some but not all of these boats, the tack of the sail is connected to the boom on a hook here. So we'll attach the tack of the sail to the hook. And if we have trouble doing that, like I am, or if there isn't a hook, as there isn't on all of the boats, what you can do is pull the sail all the way up and hold the tack of the sail connected to the boom by means of the Cunningham. Okay, so we got the sail all the way up. Going to take the slack in on the halyard and cleat it off. The cleat hitch, make sure it's good and tight. Now, at this point, you step off the boat onto the dock and take a look at the sail and see if the sail shape is correct. You can see the sail a lot easier from the dock than you can from looking up inside the boat. A very common problem is this, where the reefing line's caught around the boom as you're raising the sail. And you can see there's kind of a funky shape here on the leech, and it's very easily fixed. Lift the boom, unwrap the reefing line, and there you go. Finally, I'm going to think about the remaining controls on the shape of the sail. That's the Cunningham, the vang, and the outhaul at the end of the boom. That controls the tension along several sides of the sail and controls how much curvature there is in the sail. They all have very simple rules: loose on light wind days, tight on heavy wind days. On a lighter wind day, since the sail is a wing when you're going upwind, you want more curvature because more curvature in a wing is more power. On a heavy wind day, you want to take some of that power away because it's just heeling you over without giving you more speed. So you tighten everything up. So I'll set the Cunningham, which on the Quest is a line like this that goes through the grommet on the starboard side, comes down on the port side into a cleat that you can't see. On a light wind day, I'm not going to tighten that, but I'm going to rig it. So if the wind comes up when I'm on the water, I can tighten it easily without having to fiddle with it. So that's tight. I'll tighten the vang, and I'll tighten the outhaul. The outhaul on the Quest is at the end of the boom, goes to a cleat that you can't see on the port side of the boom. And when you're adjusting the outhaul, it's not uncommon for this lug that holds it into the boom to jam. So you have to adjust it sometimes with two hands, one moving the sail back and forth and the other setting the outhaul into the cleat. And then finally you want to clean up the main halyard by coiling it. And on the Quest there's this convenient pocket held together by Velcro that you can stuff it in. And now we're ready to go. One of the big differences between a Bahia and the Quest is the way you reef the mainsail. That is, the way you turn it from a large sail into a smaller sail for higher winds. You can reef at the dock. If you look out and you see that big waves out there and the wind is strong, you can go out reefed. Or you can heave to and reef while you're on the water. First thing you do is make sure Cunningham is completely de-rigged. Pull it all the way through. The bang is loose and the outhaul's loose. Unlike the Bahia, there's a single reefing line right here that reefs the leech of the sail. The way you reef the luff of the sail is by lowering it and connecting the ring that you see there onto the hook at the gooseneck, or alternatively using the Cunningham to hold it down to the boom. So the first thing we want to do now is get the halyard ready to go and ease the halyard maybe 10-12 inches. Bring the sail down a little bit. If you don't do that, you won't be able to pull the clew of the sail, the boom of the sail, all the way up to the clew. Now we grab the reefing line and pull it forward to pull the boom completely to the clew. If it doesn't go all the way, you might have to lower the mainsail a little more. And there we are. Make sure it's securely held in the cleat. Now we're going to pull the sail down, loosening the halyard until we can either set the hook into this ring like we've done now. If there isn't a hook, or if you have trouble doing that, bring it down to where this grommet is maybe 8 inches above the boom and use the Cunningham to connect it. So now we're going to put tension back in the mainsail. Oh, the other thing that I should have done, so you're going to lower the mainsail to where you can put this hook into, or this ring into the hook. And you'll notice that there's a lug here right around the reefing point that goes into the mast to hold the tack of the sail to the mast. It's sometimes difficult to get the ring and the lug at the same time. You can use the ring on the other side like I'm doing now. Now I'll pull the sail up all the way to tension the luff of the sail and cleat off the halyard. On the RS Quest, you'll see we have reefing ties, so we can roll up the sail and make it nice and pretty. There's a line hanging on each side. I just roll the sail up into itself like this. I tie the reefing ties around the sail, but not around the boom. If you tie it around the boom, you could potentially damage the sail. And I'll use the reefing knot or the square knot. And there's one other tie here. That I'll secure. And you want these relatively loose. They're just holding the sail out of the way. So now we're going to clean up the halyard. You'll notice there's another set of pockets held together by Velcro around the reefing point on the mainsail. And I'm just going to coil the halyard, stuff it in, do the same with the reefing line, get it out of the way, and seal the Velcro. And finally, I'm going to set the other controls on the sail. I'm going to take the Cunningham, that I had de-rigged prior to reefing, run it through this grommet that's about 7 inches up the luff of the sail from the gooseneck, down into the cleat on port side, and generally speaking, if you've reefed the sail, you're going to want this tight. Set the vang, loose or tight, according to the conditions, and you don't have a separate outhaul. The reefing line serves as an outhaul when the sail is reefed. So that's it. Inspection, using the hoist, rigging full mainsail, and reefing. You'll get good practice if you show up early for lessons or help out with Fast Track getting boats into the water. You can also come down to the club and practice this anytime the club is open, either on the water or on land. You don't need a rating to use the hoist to put the boat in the water and practice rigging it. If you practice on land, make sure the boat is pointed into the wind and that you have support under the back of the boat so it won't tip if you step into the back of the cockpit. There are a few differences in rigging a Bahia, so you should practice on both boats. Ask for someone to explain the differences to you. So now go out and practice and get that rigging test done.